At exactly 2:41 p.m., a motorbike clipped the edge of a street vendor's cart outside New York Police Station. No one died. No one even broke a bone. It should have been paperwork and a bandage, another small chaos in a busy city. But when the bike fell, a canvas bag split open on the road, and a case that had been cold for months began to bleed evidence in broad daylight. New York Station sits where noise never ends: traffic, vendors, arguments, prayer calls, phone ringtones, and the endless hum of a city that rarely pauses. Two men argued on the curb. One claimed he was hit. The other said he was pushed. And in the middle of their shouting, documents. Not a few. Dozens. Inspector David had been working one file in particular for nearly 3 months. A public renovation project. A school. A missing sum of money large enough to change lives, and small enough, in the world of contracts, to disappear quietly. On paper, the project looked clean: approvals, stamps, signatures, supplier payments. In reality, nearly 40 lakh taka had vanished after disbursement, without a single credible explanation. Jansen didn't see an accident first. He saw a torn bag and a set of documents that were too organized to be random. They answered too quickly. That's one of the oldest tells, when fear speaks faster than logic. Inside the station, the documents began to tell their story. Bank deposit slips, invoices, transport receipts, photocopies of national IDs, several of them suspiciously pristine, and one typed page that looked like it belonged to an accountant, not a courier. Jansen compared the dates to the official project ledger. The numbers matched. The timeline matched. But the recipients didn't. The papers showed something the official file didn't: a trail of smaller accounts, split deposits, and repeated withdrawals, designed to keep any single movement from looking too large. Jansen called the bank liaison officer, a link police use for time-sensitive verification. The response came back quickly. The account was active. Withdrawals were frequent. Mostly cash. CCTV doesn't always give you a face. Sometimes it gives you something smaller: a habit, a posture, a scar, an identifying detail that survives a disguise. 2 weeks earlier, Jansen had interviewed the contractor's assistant, Pitter, who insisted he was only a clerk. He had the same crescent scar near his ear. That's the first line in many financial crimes. "I'm too small to matter." Then Jansen found something even more dangerous than receipts. A confession doesn't always look like "I did it." Sometimes it looks like instructions. And that silence was a new truth. This wasn't one man. This was a system. When public money disappears, it rarely vanishes in one move. It travels. It splits. It hides inside normal activity, like dirty water mixed into a clean river. Jansen reopened the entire case with a new lens. Not "who stole the money?" but "how was stealing made to look normal?" He did what financial criminals fear most. He lined up the paperwork with reality. Transport receipts in the spilled bag listed vehicle numbers. Jansen checked them against the company register. Fake transport records meant fake delivery. And fake delivery meant the project paid for materials that never arrived. The banking trail was the real machine. A large payment would arrive in a supplier account. Then it would split into smaller transfers. Then become cash. Jansen found repetition. Same withdrawal times, same ATM locations, same rhythm. Like someone following a schedule. The two men from the accident weren't masterminds. They were couriers, hands moving packages, not brains making plans. A system survives by keeping each person small enough to feel innocent. The contractor's defense was predictable. Delays, misunderstandings, clerical errors, blame without names. Jansen didn't argue. He collected. Because in financial crime, arguments are smoke. Records are fire. Several ID copies used for accounts were duplicates. Same faces, different names. Some belonged to people who had never opened a bank account at all. Now the case had an additional crime: identity misuse. The tool that made the money trail harder to trace. Jansen's team prepared warrants, account freezes, and formal requests to banks. The system began to panic. And panic makes mistakes. When a system collapses, it doesn't collapse gracefully. It shakes. It spills names. It tries to cut off weak parts to protect the core. After the phone call from Jansen, the contractor stopped answering. A man who had once enjoyed meetings suddenly couldn't be found. Jansen didn't chase rumors. He chased what the papers had already shown. The contractor's financial ties, the ATM locations, and the Phase 2 allocation list. The withdrawals had a routine. And routines are predictable. The moment he inserted his card, the case stopped being theory. The man was not just a clerk. He was the hand that turned bank balance into cash. Financial crime doesn't always end with a dramatic confession. More often, it ends with exhaustion. When the liar realizes the truth has more documents than he has excuses. Pitter described a structure. A contractor who controlled approvals through relationships. An assistant who managed the paperwork. Couriers who moved documents and cash. And an accounts office that signed without looking too closely. In the end, the biggest victim wasn't a bank. It wasn't an office. It was a place that should have been repaired months ago. Public money doesn't vanish into air. It becomes someone's phone, someone's land, someone's car. And someone else's cracked wall stays cracked. When the final report was drafted, a young constable asked a question that sounded like a joke. Because that's what made this story different. A corrupt system didn't fall because someone suddenly grew brave. It fell because gravity did its job. A bag tore, and the truth scattered across the road outside a police station. Most days, accidents are only accidents. Noise, pain, and inconvenience, then a return to normal. But once in a while, something breaks in exactly the wrong place for the guilty, and the right place for the truth. At 2:41 in the afternoon, in front of New York Police Station, a motorbike hit a street cart. No one died. No one was seriously injured. It should have been a small report, a fine, and a lecture. But when the bike fell, a canvas bag ripped open on the road. And the contents, documents, receipts, bank slips, scattered across the street like someone's private life had been turned inside out. New York isn't quiet. It never has been. If you spend long enough near its gate, you'll see every kind of human behavior: frustration, fear, anger, bargaining, begging, joking. And more often than you'd like, small accidents that become big arguments. The thin man said the rider came too fast. The rider said the thin man stepped into the road. Their voices rose the way voices do when both people are trying to avoid blame. And then the constable noticed the bag. Not because it was expensive, because it was heavy. Because it wasn't full of food, or tools, or clothing. It was full of paperwork. For months, Jansen had been stuck on a case that didn't behave like normal theft. There was no forced entry. No missing safe. No witness who saw a man running away. Instead, there was something much harder. Money missing from a government renovation project. And every form stamped as if nothing was wrong. Jansen bent down and lifted a slip off the road. A bank deposit slip. Not torn. Not old. Recent. Then another. An invoice. Then another. A photocopy of a national ID. He'd seen enough real paperwork to know the difference between normal mess and deliberate order. These were the kind of documents that travel together for a reason. They both answered too fast. Too eager. And that told Jansen something simple. The bag mattered. Inside, the documents became clearer. There were invoices for building materials, transport receipts with vehicle numbers, bank slips, many of them, some stamped, some handwritten. And then there was one typed sheet, tucked between two invoices like it had been hidden. Jansen did what good investigators do first. He compared. The dates on this sheet matched the timeline of his stuck case. The New York school renovation project had received money in clean, official installments. On paper, the money went to approved suppliers. But in reality, nearly 40 lakh taka had disappeared between disbursement and delivery. One deposit slip showed a name that appeared again and again, not always as the sender, sometimes as the final receiver, where money arrived before being withdrawn in cash. Jansen knew that name. 2 weeks earlier, he'd interviewed the contractor's assistant, a man who kept saying one phrase like it was armor. Jansen hadn't been able to prove otherwise then. Now he had something better than suspicion, a trail. The liaison confirmed what Jansen expected. The account was active. Withdrawals were frequent, mostly cash, and the withdrawals clustered around a few ATMs, almost as if the person liked familiar places. The bank's camera didn't give a clean face, but it gave a detail. The assistant he interviewed, Pitter, had the same scar. And now the case stopped being baby. By nightfall, the man was in the station. Pitter tried the usual defenses. Confusion, offense, small laughter. That line was more dangerous than a confession, because it pointed upward. A guilty system does one thing when touched by truth. It goes quiet. Money doesn't disappear by magic. It disappears through design. And as Jansen began pulling on the threads from the torn canvas bag, a pattern emerged. A machine built from forms, signatures, and people trained to look away. The official file said suppliers were paid. So Jansen visited suppliers. The official file said materials were delivered. So Jansen checked transport logs. The official file said the project progressed. So Jansen went to the school itself. Adjusted. Another word that means, don't make trouble. Jansen asked for delivery notes. The supplier produced partial notes, then excuses. The supplier was either lying or being used. Either way, the project had paid for materials that never showed up. The receipts in the canvas bag listed vehicle numbers. Jansen checked those numbers. 2 belonged to trucks sold years ago. 1 belonged to a vehicle that didn't exist in the company's records at all. Fake transport means fake delivery. Fake delivery means the project paid for air. Jansen then followed the approvals. Who signed, who verified, who passed the bills forward. Because in corruption, the biggest trick is not stealing. It's making theft look like routine. Jansen collected signature samples, approval chains, and call records. He wasn't hunting one person. He was mapping a network. The 2 men from the accident, Mark and Alvar, weren't accountants. They weren't planners. They were movers. They carried documents and sometimes cash. They were paid to not ask questions. This is how a machine stays safe. Each person holds one piece, and no one is supposed to see the whole. Then Jansen noticed something unsettling. Some ID copies were reused, same face, different account names. That meant the accounts were either fake or opened using stolen identity documents. Now the case wasn't only about missing renovation funds. It was about how ordinary people get pulled into crimes they never agreed to. Jansen moved quickly. Formal bank requests, account monitoring, warrants for documents. The system began to panic. Because a paper-based crime depends on one thing, time. Time to bury. Time to confuse. Time to delay. Jansen was removing time. When a corrupt system senses danger, it tries to do 2 things. Erase evidence and sacrifice someone smaller. But the accident had already done the opposite. It preserved evidence and it pulled the small people into the light where they could talk. The account withdrawals had a pattern. Same locations, same hours, same pace. And a pattern is a promise. It means someone will return. When the machine started dispensing cash, the case became physical. Officers approached calmly, no dramatic shouting. Just hands, procedure, control. Weeks later, the case file looked different. It wasn't a dead weight on a shelf. It was a living chain of evidence, documents, bank trails, witness statements, and arrests. A young constable, watching Ramon seal the torn canvas bag into evidence storage, asked quietly, "Most days, accidents are only accidents. Noise, bruises, and a return to routine. But once in a while, something breaks in the wrong place for the guilty, and the right place for the truth."